Blizzard's latest game may be a mistake, and there's every chance you haven't even heard of it, because now, less than a year after stopping Warcraft Rumble and Warzone Mobile, Activision Blizzard just revealed Overwatch Mobile. It's called Overwatch Rush, but it is Overwatch for a phone. The game's taken 5 years to get made, but the problem for them is, over those 5 years, everything changed. Just like with the rest of the games industry, it turns out the mobile game sector is also in trouble. And the impact is not going to stay contained to just mobile. It is actually going to send shockwaves through to all the games that we love. But first, let's talk about what the hell Blizzard is doing and why Overwatch Rush is even a thing. Overwatch Mobile has been quietly in the works since at least 2021, which is when job listings first hinted that the thing existed. But then, in Jason Schreier's 2024 Blizzard book, quite the book by the way, he confirmed that this game and a broader franchise push under Walter Kong had actually survived the transition over to Microsoft. And now, finally, I guess 5 years later, Overwatch Rush has been revealed. It happened in an exclusive published by Game Informer, and we see a top-down streamlined version of Overwatch built by a mobile-first game team not located in Irvine, California, but in Barcelona. We see a selection of the casters there, they've got top-down style versions of their abilities, and it basically turns the game into a challenge of positioning more than a challenge of aiming. So in many ways, not that different from the full game. Now, the game is currently preparing for testing, and usually these games go into testing in like Southeast Asian territories, sometimes Australia, so that happens first. But I would be shocked if we don't hear more about this later, perhaps at BlizzCon this year, because we all know that mobile games and BlizzCon go together real well. But what feels weirdest to me about all of this is actually the timing, and that's because Activision Blizzard only just shut down 2 internally developed mobile games in the last year. I have a quick point to make though. You probably heard the buzz around Claude Code and Cursor. They're incredible in the right hands, but they can also be noob trap central. Personally, I've been building a lot of custom tools using Claude Code lately, like a room planner and a bunch of other things. It's genuinely fun, but that stuff can't save you from yourself if you don't actually understand what it is that you're making. And that's why today's sponsor, Boot.dev, matters more than ever. What they do is they teach back-end development. It's the kind of thing that lands you those 100K plus jobs, but they do it through a proper 12-month structured program that's structured like an RPG. It is amazing. It is designed for gamers. They've got over 750,000 students who have done 33.7 million lessons. That's insane. And those lessons are using the likes of Python, TypeScript, and Go. It's all taught from the fundamentals up. And from my perspective, well, I did a BEng in computer science, mostly focused on C++ and C#, so game engine stuff. A completely different world to web dev, but I can say that Boot's teaching approach is just incalculably better and more practical than how things were done during university. So this isn't really about, say, replacing the Claude Code and telling you, no, do everything by hand. No. This is about actually understanding what you're building, actually understanding the real skills. And unlike those too good to be true rapid boot camps, Boot.dev is affordable, self-paced, and designed to have a full year of learning, so you can actually be a pro. And you'll get 25% off your first purchase at boot.dev/Bellular News. You'll save the most using that on an annual sub, and if you're not happy, well, they will refund you on the spot. So how does this make any sense? Well, I guess one thing I will say is that timing-wise, this is probably the best time that they could have announced this, because the game is in the best state that it's been in years, actually. And I'd say that's both as a franchise and a game. If you take a look at Overwatch's social media, the current season, which is called Overwatch Season 1, because of course they've dropped the 2, it had higher player numbers in its second weekend than in its first weekend, and they say that's, quote, the first time that has happened since Overwatch 2 launched in 2022. Now that certainly helps avoid a don't you guys have phones moment, right? Because, yeah, the game is in a better state. But there's another thing that helps as well, and that's the confirmation that this comes from a separate team, not from Team 4. But that was the same arrangement that existed for the 2 mobile games that Activision Blizzard only just gave up on. Warcraft Rumble effectively died in July 2025, with most of its team being laid off. Then Warzone Mobile ended support in May 2025, and as of April this year, everything will be shut off. Now, those are both internally developed games, the idea being to recoup as much money as possible without having to cut in a partner like Tencent or NetEase. But you'll notice that while the majority of the Warcraft Rumble team were axed, that doesn't appear to have been the same for the Warzone people, and maybe the Barcelona teams who were working in Warzone, well, maybe they're the people working in Overwatch now. But those aren't their only mobile games. There's the Tencent partnered Call of Duty Mobile and the NetEase partnered Diablo Immortal. And those games both seem to be going strong. Meanwhile, a bigger cut of nothing from the cancelled games is of course still nothing, which shows that their internal efforts haven't really went well thus far. And in the 5 years since work started on this game, there's the small little fact that the industry has changed around it, and dramatically so. As it turns out, you can no longer rely on mobile games to print money and fund everything else. And if you're the type who really doesn't like what mobile games have done to the market, you might enjoy the next part of this video. 0.2%. That's all the growth that AppMagic analysts claim the mobile market saw in 2025. That is slow, and their framing is that the market is, quote, exhausted. That's not a nice word, doesn't look healthy. And simply put, it seems there's no more room for the kind of growth that many developers have expected within mobile, and globally, mobile game spending and installations are flat. I mean, take a look at this chart from the Opinion State of Gaming report. Through the 2010s, you can see why everyone was pumping out mobile games. And then there's the spike in 2021. That easily explains why someone would have commissioned Overwatch Mobile. Think about how happy Bobby Kotick would have been with a fresh pile of Overwatch cash. Just look at his little face, he would have been thrilled. It was a growing market, and in a way, effectively free money. I mean, you've already got the massive global brand, why not shit out a mobile game and get a bunch of money? Except that by now in 2026, of course the stat is 2025, the revenue has plateaued, and even fewer games, actually fewer games than ever, are being installed by people on their phones. And the ones that are probably older games pulling people back with free gameplay because players can't really afford new paid titles or lots of big new paid things in their games. That's why we see the stagnation in this growth. But here's the thing, and why it may be even worse. What I just talked about was the global picture, but we see the majority of growth seems to have came from smaller, less established territories, whilst the major countries have been the ones declining. And for a prime example, we can look at the United States. It is at its lowest rate of game installs in 12 years, and playtime is static. So in that sense, Overwatch may actually be a smarter play than Warzone or Warcraft. And I say that because of China. China has fairly massive interest in the Overwatch brand. So if Blizzard can carve out a little bit of a niche over in China with this Overwatch mobile game, maybe they could capture some of the growth that is left in the market. Maybe they can make it work, but there's still ample reason to believe that they can't. Supercell, who are titans in the mobile games industry, issued a stark warning, even in light of them getting a record year of revenue. You see, they had to kill their first game after launch. Ever. They had never had to do that before. And they did that even though they got 75 million downloads, they still had to shut it down. And that's because at their scale, success means $1 billion. It means far, far larger. But only 22 games managed that in 2025, and just 2 of those games came from Western teams, and those came from teams who specialize in mobile. So for over a decade, we've seen that publishers have tried to lean on mobile revenue to supplement their big, full game development, but it's now clear that that is dying, and what happens to that revenue will bleed through into the games that we care about. So if all these massive publishers are banking on mobile revenue but aren't making their money back, what does it actually mean for the devs of the games that we like? Thankfully, we've got a perfect example from our friends over at Sega. Their big acquisition during the pandemic, Free-for-All, was supposed to give them security. Spoiler warning, it did not. They purchased Rovio, the people who made Angry Birds. Yes, they bought Angry Birds for $776 million in 2023. And then, in February 2026, they wrote off $200 million in value. So that's just over 25% of the purchase price gone. Kaput. Profits weren't as high, the market wasn't as friendly, and it wasn't just Rovio. Their new games, Football Manager 26 and a Switch port of Persona 3 Reload, also underperformed. But here's where it circles back to Blizzard, at least for today's story. Another game that underperformed was Sonic Rumble. Warcraft Rumble, Sonic Rumble, it's just not good for the Rumblers out there. Now, it was a free-to-play Sonic platformer that was developed by Rovio internally. It was one that took, an existing IP that everyone knows and some people really do deeply love, Sonic, And they made a mobile version of it, just like what Blizzard is doing with Overwatch. Just that Sonic Rumble flopped, and now Sega has to take a loss and work out how to fill the gap in next year's plans. It's quite grim then. And here's where it stops being a mobile game story. Whenever a console or PC publisher makes mobile games, the whole point is to offset the cost of making the games that you care about. You know, making the main event. If mobile isn't producing the cash, then that money has still got to come from somewhere. And if total audiences are shrinking or are just stagnant, then the people who are still playing games, well, they will be squeezed harder. That'll mean more premium products, that'll mean more subscription deals, more microtransactions, and more games pushed out too early to hit financial targets. Not necessarily quality targets. We quite literally saw that with, to do a very easy example, Monster Hunter last year. So all that's to say that if the mobile pillar that is holding some of these companies up starts to crumble, it could bring a whole lot down with it. Ultimately, a revenue stream that publishers relied on to spread the risk and cost of development out is now drying up. Mobile, the engine funding major publishers through their divisions like King, is no longer as rewarding a bet as it's been for many years. I mean, do you remember during the Activision Blizzard merger stuff, one of the things Microsoft was talking about was wanting more of a presence in mobile. It was almost framing like, we really want King. Well, it no longer looks like that mobile game space is doing as well. It certainly looks like the growth has flattened out. And it does make me think of a lot of recent articles, recent research and stuff, of how just gaming is actually struggling against the likes of short-form video, amongst other things. And I guess it begs the question, if your mobile phone can play a phone game or can play, let's just say, porn or TikTok, well, it seems like a lot of people are more immediately engaged by not the mobile game. And the thing for all of us to examine is that right now it seems that it's stagnant. But is it just that it's stopped growing and is going to be stagnant for ages? Or is a trend actually changing? Will it move from stagnant to being in decline? And if so, what are the systemic risks that that poses to the rest of the industry? Because at the end of the day, money's money. Revenue is revenue, whether it comes from console, PC, or mobile. So if that mobile revenue starts to just dry up, disappear, and go other places, it could pose a lot of risk to the balance sheets of companies. And as we know, whenever that balance sheet is looking bad, whenever investors want to see a strong signal of prudent management, well, that's when we start to get layoffs. That's when we start to see risky but potentially innovative projects get killed in the cradle. That's the kind of thing that's worrying. We've already seen first-party failure with Warcraft Rumble and Warzone Mobile. To be honest with you, I don't think Overwatch Rush's chances are that good at all, unless they can pull something off in the East. Barring that, I just don't see this working at all. But you know who is working? Maybe even harder than ever. The lawyers. The many lawyers surrounding Ashes of Creation. My god, that story has developed, and you can learn all about it in this video next.